we're headed into a new era here, and the effort from the powers that be will be total control of everything, using things like Brave New World in 1984 as the pre-echoes of where they'd like to see this all go. When I was young, not every house had a television. And then pretty soon everyone had a black and white. And by the time the 80s rolled around, everyone had a color. And not long after that, almost every room in the house got a television. And television is designed to do one thing, program the masses. There are quotes from people who worked around Edward Bernays who said things like, you want me to control the world? I can do that easily. Just give me control of television. If you look at the back of your television, there's a Hertz rating. Many of the Hertz ratings on TV are getting well over 100. That 100 means it's flickering in your face 100 times a second. It's going to be used for data collection and for censorship, which has already been proven. People have the sway here. They've just been convinced and cowed that, oh, we can't do anything. These people have control. Nonsense. You stand up for what you feel is correct, and you don't bow down to things you know are black as, hell's chasm, like censorship. That is among the highest crime. Like in the 70s, if this kind of censorship went on, people would have been battle ready, even trying to figure out what they were checking out on their library card back then. Those were fighting words. Stand up. I'm not saying be rude. I'm not saying fight with people, but do not accept things that you know to be wrong. So you've got a choice. Do you want to be like the animals in Animal Farm, or do you want to be a human being? Is it worth being alive as a human being in a condition like that? I would suggest that it's not. That person is no longer thinking for themselves. They've been co-opted into the system. They're bereft of common sense. That's one of the first things technology does, is convinces us that things that are completely unbelievable are believable. And that is the death of common sense. The idea, there's many examples of it. And over time, it's like all things, basically you could almost view being a human being in some way is just addictions. It's habit. What are our habits? Well, we go to work every day. We dress in this certain way. We eat these certain foods most of the time. It's akin to addiction. These are the habits we've formed. And everybody knows how hard it is to walk away from a well-formed habit. But I don't know, around the turn of the century or sometime, a lot more minds began to come online. So for my part, you offer what you consider to be common sense. You offer a path, and if that mind is ready, well, then there's another one that's hopefully headed in a helpful direction. But there's another side to this as well. To understand the scope of fallacy requires that you know something about the system that you're going to call false. And that's a double-edged sword. That means that if you're in school, you should be learning, you should be understanding it. But there's a fine line between all this outside input becoming your main tiller in life, or just coming on board as information. When you learn a thing, it gives you power to challenge a thing. If you know nothing about a thing, then your power to challenge that thing is diminished. What is your foundation? Is your foundation what you learned in class today? Is your foundation something else? For me, I spent so much time in the natural world. That was my foundation. There's no lie in it. You're never going to have to stop and say, hey, man, is that bird trying to fool me? Is that tree deceptive? These are not concerns you have under these things. But if your foundation becomes compassion, concern for things, then it doesn't matter what you learn on top of it, because your foundation is already there. It's just kind of dependent on what you choose your baseline to be, I guess. And you can say, no, Coke's really not for me. And by the way, all the water in that Coke has fluoride in it. In other words, you wouldn't find that in nature if you were wandering around. And these are things that we need to start to wake up to, because part of the control system is not necessarily doing things to us. It's paving the way for us to do things to ourselves. Next time someone wants to cry about how bad the powers that be are, the truth is you're the one making the decisions. Because you're a human being and you can understand what is correct and you can examine what is common sense. They don't want more minds coming online because a mind that's waking up is a mind that's hard to control. We've all been convinced that basically technology is magic, and it's not. There are no rockets leaving this place. You've been lied to. No one stood on the moon. You've been convinced that technology can do all these amazing things, but in fact, what technology has been about is not even allowing to know for you to understand where it is you exist, to have an accurate description. Everyone listening has no idea the shape of the continent they're standing on right now, and I can prove it. Go get a Gall map, Gall Peters map. Go get any one of the endless map projections, put them all next to each other, and you will see they are all different. It's all nonsense. And this is the modern world. The programming of the modern world requires that the individual to be programmed is bereft of common sense. As soon as you start to do better, you start to feel better. You start to think more clearly. This world is providing so many false things for you to believe in right now. And think about this. If you don't even accurately know where you exist, how can you possibly know where you can go? If all the foundational things you believe are correct are not correct, that basically means, and this is one of the primary concerns of programming, is that every single decision you make based on a fallacy cannot be correct. If you make a decision based on something incorrect, the decision cannot, by definition, be a correct decision. And that is the way the vast majority of us lead our lives. What kind of a society is that? Is there any spirituality left in a society like this? And that sets aside that the whole premise of what we're talking about is based on hypermateriality. We create this reality. So in a time when news is just here to make you unhappy and negative and lower your vibration and convince you that human beings just need a gun to go out and kill a few hundred people every day and all this made up nonsense, then it leads you away from what's actually true. And that's why it's there, because people who buy into that nonsense are so much more controllable. Anyone who buys into this is leaving common sense at the doorstep. In the modern technological age, so much data has been collected on all of us and on groups of us and on countries of us that you go ahead. You want to buy into a revolution, you see what happens next. You'll find yourself behind barbed wire so quickly, and then all rules are off the table. That's why they would push a thing like that. What actually will make a difference is understanding you're all connected and changing your mind. Because once a mind is changed, it will not accept nonsense to the same degree it once did. That will become unacceptable. And violence, on the face of it, to a common sense mind is unacceptable, with very few possibilities that would ever elicit that reaction. If you get sucked into, oh, we're all going to rise up. Yeah, good luck with that. Good frickin' luck. They're building fenced cages all over this world for people who want to rise up. You want to get violent, then the reaction you get back is going to take everything you ever had, and including the possibility of moving around. There's other ways, and a higher-minded civilization doesn't require it. If you just quit opting into the systems and quit falling for the nonsense and turn off your evening news, that's a much better approach. Your mind is yours, and as long as you don't surrender it, you can do what you will with it. If you knuckle under to programming and you dope yourself out on TV and you take too many pharmaceutical drugs, your mind's probably not going to be yours in the same way. My point is, changing a mind is truly affecting something. This is the whole thing. This is why all the pressure and the powers that be are up to their fake news and their fake violence and all their nonsense, is because, man, there are all these potential minds about to come online, and we've got to introduce the black tar poison. And the real bitch of it is we're not going to force feed it. We're just going to put it out there and let them do it to themselves. We're going to put out all these shows that are unhelpful. We're going to put out all this food that will basically make you into an obese, unhealthy, dull mind. We're going to put fluoride out there so we can calcify every pineal gland that comes in contact with it over time. That's what's going on. Now you begin to understand what television does, what movies do, what gaming does, what the modern information age does to the whole of humanity. Because let me tell you something, there was a time in this world when people built cathedrals out of stone to the sky that blow your freaking mind when you look at the rectangles and cubes we live in now. Focus your mind on something else, trying to push against that frickin' storm cloud every one of us sees on the horizon if they choose to look. And that's part of the problem too, is because we still have endless people who will look up every day, see lines in the sky, and be conned by the contrail idea. They don't understand that something like 2 overarching corporations own everything that matters in this world, including every information system with very few exceptions. And at the base of that, all the person needs to know is power corrupts, and absolute power absolutely corrupts. So if you want to wake up in 10 years and you have to get permission to go to the ATM machine, and when you do, it says, sorry, you can't have money today because this license isn't up to date or that thing. You see, but a common sense human mind with enough other common sense human minds will not accept that nonsense. And that is the key to all of this. The average human being is never even considered a living being anymore by the systems that are in place. You are a statistical probability. You are a number. And that is a far cry from 20 years ago in my life when I could still be the lowly moniker of customer. Those days are going away quickly, and we will demonstrate that it is the most basic of things that we've known probably since the early 1900s that are driving the actual digital time machine that allows the powers that be to project an outcome with a 99% certainty on almost anything with an endless data stream, which is now basically infinite because every day so much data is collected it could not be quantified. And by the way, there's more on the way. In other words, the data sample, it could conceivably be considered infinite at this point. And who knows what kinds of computers, you know, the average person doesn't even know exist. Are they based on the brain? Are they based, who knows? But the power of computing by the most wealthy among us is certainly not the Apple or the PC. We could live better. There was a time, probably, I'm nearly convinced of it, that is hidden from us in our history. Much better place to be. Like a lot of people consider this human prison right now, probably a time when it wasn't considered in this way, and that's been covered up. And what's happened is we've been put into these artificial, completely, like your birth certificate. You know, a corporation is set up at your birth and they're going to call that a person. It's not even a real thing. It's just this made up idea that binds, you know, so many of us. There was a time before, probably, and we could all be living better lives, and we could all be doing high human endeavors, higher mindedness, maybe in a society that doesn't even need a damn cell phone. We don't have to live like slaves. And this is the slavery system I'm speaking of. We don't have to live like this. And it will take aware minds, common sense minds to say, you know what, we've had enough. We're not fighting with you. We're not stepping up to lower ourselves in any way. We're just not accepting your nonsense anymore. Because I was a webmaster for many years and I knew where all this was going. It was clear. That's why I never put my identity out anywhere, because I knew what the data collection was about. I worked in places where they did data mining, among other things. And I have zero respect for that kind of a mindset in our world. Selfishness and theft of ideas to be misused. I don't want to reach the end of my life and look back and have that have been the whole. So we've all been taught that it's very easy to judge other people, and few of us have been taught that maybe if we were standing in that person's shoes, we'd have a much better grip on why they're acting the way they act. And that's a truth. We know where we are in the timeline, and we know there's a few of us that can try, and we know that not everybody is the same. Some people will never stand up because it's not in their nature. But if enough people stand up, even those people might get behind them.
True.
So, and the one thing they never want is for you to spend your worshipful moments with things that matter, like the natural world, and understanding that you're connected to everything else in this natural world. And so that's what entertainment is about. And I saw it firsthand. And why do you vote? It's a one-sided game, and the Electoral College is an old boys club. And how many times have you been told, oh, the popular vote? You're actually going to get invested in an argument of a person you had no part in picking, no part in seating, no part in anything. And by the way, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are related to the same royal bloodline, just to let you know. And you can't find another president, maybe one or two that they're not sure of, that can't say the same thing. You are blind. And if you can point to any president in modern history that ever did anything that helped, I'd like to know about it. What's at stake is total control of everything, including the way you think. When technology comes a little further and they start beeping images of Allah and Jesus into your brain, and you can't determine that it's not your thought. All you human beings out there, get back to your common sense and start acting like a unique human being, and demand that your divine rights as a living human being are not violated. It is against universal law for a group of human beings to go into a forest and set a bear trap intended to catch human beings and hide it so well that it is virtually impossible for anyone to understand that there is a bear trap. And if they catch someone in that bear trap under those circumstances, they have violated universal law. But by their warped method of thinking, if they simply put a sign up at the edge of the woods that says, people may not want to walk here, there might be traps, they think they've done all they need to do, and they go set their traps anyhow. But that's where we're at. You know, you get back to being a unique human being and demand your divine recognition in this world, and the system programming you to try to eat your own babies. That's what that is. Emotion is the one requirement for black magic. They need to get you in a high emotional state. When they want to do their malicious magic, they need you in that hyper emotional state. And this is part of the problem of the modern era. All our culture comes from movies in the West. There are elevated minds in this world that would tell you that emotion is wasted motion, and they are not wrong. Because if you can look at death or life or suffering or any other thing with an even keel in your mindset, then you have more to offer the situation. That hyper emotional state. And when you turn on your television and some other make-believe person just shot down God knows how many people with this many weapons, that hyper emotional state is being sown for a reason, and it's going to further the total control that's going to be attempted to follow. But emotion is just a weapon used against you at this point in the game. And you break down and you start crying hysterically that you can't think anymore. And what you were releasing is hyper energy. And those are the fertile fields in which devilish deeds are done. And that's the truth of it. And it's a shame, because most people believe firmly that being overly lovey-dovey or very sad when things happen, that's how a good human being should be. But you want to know something? A good human being in this day and age is a target. We live in a closed system for the most part. What is here is here. It relies on what we might call alchemy now. It used to be natural sciences back in the day when scientific endeavors had a concern for the natural world, which they no longer do. It's a perversion. Science now is hypermateriality with no concern for the natural world, but it differs from the materiality of science, even the idea of elements. Like science will tell you there's 120 some elements that are unchangeable. They can't be divided chemically, all this other nonsense. But on the other side, the older way, the idea of elements is not a thing. It's a philosophical idea. And what it states is that this system is so perfect from our point of view that one thing will just turn into another, into another, into another, into another. In the same way a whale body dies and some fish eat it, then it sinks to the bottom and other things eat it, and pretty soon it's recycled right back into the very environment from which it sprung, and the cycle continues on. The simplest way to think about this is the idea of transmuting water into air. Of course, we can all heat water into steam, and we've done the most basic transmutation. And then, of course, that water that's become air can turn back into water or any other thing. These philosophical principles respected the natural world and observed the natural world, where I maintain there is no lie. And that's where you learn things of value. And if you're a person that thinks there is a creator, then that is a helpful way for you to think. If you do not accept a creator, it is nonetheless helpful, because it teaches you to respect this place from which you sprung. And even in people who choose not to take on any modern religious connotation, they can't deny that the idea of all of us are of the dust and all of us return, those are true things. Technology, as we see it now, is a perversion, because it pre-assumes that a human being couldn't do these things without it. And everything it's going to do is artificial, whereas a human being that didn't need technology would only be doing naturally acceptable things. And I suppose people can split hairs and argue that even technology has its roots in the natural world, but in some ways, the real idea of man-made is to connive nature to get a thing that would not have possibly been created by nature. And use nature as your baseline, first and foremost. Secondarily, you must possess common sense, which is a thing most of us have trained out of us by the time we're through grade school. Go back and understand what common sense truly is. Using nature as your baseline, the natural world, and common sense is always the foundation from which I work. If every person understands that what makes a human being is first and foremost, above every other thing, freedom of thought, then you will not allow these things to come. And until they recognize the right of a human being to freely speak and think, they are what they are. What you are doing is stifling free speech and trying to contain what it means to be a living human being. And we got a generation of pretty special young people coming behind us, and I pray to heaven above, if there is such a place, that they don't get wrapped up too tightly in video games, because for them, that will be the drug culture that I survived. That will be the diminishing, the tarnishing of the human mind. Many of them will be probably too advanced to fall for it, and their abilities will shine through. I pray that they're able to come through the gauntlet and do what they need to do next. We're laying a foundation here, and if they don't stand on our shoulders, then they're starting from zero again. And I don't know how long we're going to get away with starting from zero over and over again. We've been in a hyper masculine world where all through the 50s, what happened when the woman come on screen, right? What was the programming? Oh, the little lady, let me give you a hand, little lady. You're helpless. You can't do anything on your own. Or as soon as she comes on stage, the sexy music starts up. Now women can kick anyone's butt. They're superheroes. It's the gender right now that are involved in gender confusion, pushing gay agendas. Most of the white races and many of the Asian races are going to be on the endangered species list by 2100, the year 2100, unless that changes. And you're being told right now the opposite. We're going to have water wars. There's not going to be enough food. Guess what? You're listening to programming. Treat people with respect. Don't accuse people of things. Be an example that other people would appreciate and try to follow. And above all things, value common sense and value the natural world, because the natural world will never lie to you, ever. It doesn't even have to be thought of or questioned. It is what it is. So there it is. You've been told the truth. What you choose to do with it is your decision.